Hey guys, I'm Tim Kotzman here with Ben Harris and Brad Beauchamp. How are you guys doing today?
Excellent.
Doing great, thanks.
So I understand you guys are in the real estate business. Ben, do you want to tell us how all that came to be, a little bit about your background, and we'll kind of roll from there?
Sure. Actually, let me pass it to Brad. He can go deeper into that real estate part of it, and then I'll just fill in after he goes, if you don't mind.
Great.
I'll give you the brief one maybe here. Started in real estate. So I graduated college 2004. Came up here after the Washington State to work for my father in a small town communications, two-way radio business. And in college, I'd worked for a mortgage broker as a loan officer to work through college, and got here to work for Dad. And very quickly, within about 2 months, I said, Dad, I think I can make more money golfing and being a loan officer than what you can pay me. So we opened a brokerage in 2004, did that from 2004 to 2011. And during that time, we learned how the money works to buy real estate on a small level. So started to buy repo homes on the courthouse steps, started to buy some duplexes, got into the flipping, the fix and flip game. And that kind of morphed into buying a repo house that was sitting on 5 acres. And looked around to the guys that were doing land development in our area. And I said, well, if they can do it, surely we can figure it out, or I can figure out what's going on. And so bought my first one and stumbled through a little 18-lot subdivision, ended up selling it to one of the national builders. And then from there, kind of morphed out of the mortgage business due to Dodd-Frank, and got away from that world and more into the development world, and went on to start building apartments, doing more subdivision work. But at that time, we were doing from soup to nuts. So we'd buy the raw ground, develop them all, and sell a finished lot product every time. Moving forward, I was doing that. And then Ben and I were introduced, I don't even know the year, 2015, 16, probably, as friends. Ben was still farming at the time. And by 2017 to 2019 in there, we partnered up to move forward on a project that Ben had an in on a family farm, and that kind of brought us together, which we're still developing to this day. So we haven't broke ground on that one yet, but we're working through it. So that brings us where Ben and I started working together on the subdivision. So that's the real estate world on my end. And then Ben, when he brought in there.
Sure. I mean, from my end, kind of going back, my background is in fabrication, metal fabrication, and farming. And we had a family farm and got into that. And around 1998, I actually had a chance to buy into the farm, and because I'd been working overseas. And so just had been exposed to land, been exposed to farming. You learn a lot of stuff out there on the farm, and you have a lot of time to think when you're sitting in the tractor. And fast forward, and we got to about 2015, Brad and I met, and then the opportunity came up to where we could develop the farm. And so we formed a partnership, I want to say late 2017. And since then, we've been buying land, developing land, and building out BFR neighborhoods, which are built for rent neighborhoods. And so that's kind of where we sit today.
And can you explain a little bit what a build to rent neighborhood is for those that might not be familiar?
Sure. Brad, I'll go first, and then you fill in the blanks. So traditionally, you've had apartments and you've had single family homes. And, back, I want to say 2008, during the great financial crisis, a lot of these homes went into foreclosure. And so a lot of big institutions started buying these homes and renting them out, leasing them out. How that's progressed today is there's a lot of pushback in that space, going in and competing with residents who live there, the locals, right? Because Wall Street has a lot more buying power. And so what's happening in the BFR space is you're going in and building out full communities, right? And so the reason you do that is because there's a gap in America where they can't afford a single family home, because that price is whatever it is now, $450. But they don't want to live in an apartment, right? Mm-hmm. They want to have kids, they want to have a pet, they want to have a backyard, they want to have a garage, and they don't want anybody living above them. So BFR is a bit of a niche where we come in, we build out those whole communities from raw land all the way to finished product. and then we lease it up just like you would an apartment complex. And you either keep it once you roll it into permanent debt, or you sell it to somebody else who wants to hold that at a 5 or 6 cap rate. And so we feel like it's helping to solve that attainable housing problem because we're bringing more supply to the market. And so that's in a nutshell what BFR is. And sometimes people call it BTR, BFR, but it's built for rent communities.
Got it. Brad, anything to add there?
No, the only thing I'd add, I think, in that kind of the historical context of where we are, because I think it's interesting as we move forward and talk about how we went from selling dirt and buying dirt into the Bitcoin world. I think it's interesting to kind of understand the backstory. Is when we first got together, like I said, I was building apartments. I think I purchased our first parcel. Maybe before Ben came on, I'd purchased one to build a manufactured home park. And thought Ben and I got together and we thought that was the hottest and greatest thing we were ever going to do. And we actually had developed we developed 2 of them together so far. During COVID, prices spiked by 140% on a manufactured home. And that was a tough sticking point. So we're still filling one of our parks. We ended up filling one of our parks and sold it off. And why I give that background is we didn't start at build for rent. Even when we broke ground on some of these subdivisions, we were going to build it out and just build individual homes, a stick-built home, but run it as a manufactured home park. So still lease the dirt, but on a single-family home. That didn't quite take off the way we thought it was going to build. So as we continue to morph and look and grow, I think that's one of our greatest strengths is that Ben and I own this. Ben and I run it. We're here every day. We will talk things to the nth degree to where our wives, I think, are like, what can you possibly meet today on 4 hours? and maybe it's just a big circular conversation, but it's been super powerful to where the change doesn't scare us. Yeah, manufactured homes spiked and that was not going to work. And here we sit on 300 lots at the time to fill. Okay, well, let's figure out what this is. Ben went headlong into the build for rent. So just that ability to adapt, I think, has been crucial. And now we're looking at that as we move forward, kind of when we get to the Bitcoin part of this. That's the exciting thing is we're pretty nimble because we're small enough. We've had the opportunity to bring in some institutional money that made us, we were sitting there finally in one meeting in Arizona where it was a big institutional lender and builder and developer that would buy this. And we finally all kind of looked at each other and said, this doesn't work for any of us. You guys do what you do, we'll do what we do, and we can supply product. So just our adaptability, I think, has been crucial. And that's how we morphed into the dirt to the Bitcoin world, I believe.
Yeah, if you want me to touch on that a little, I don't know. I think it, business, as a small business, you've got to stay nimble and flexible. I'm probably a little bit more on the liberal, open, creative side. In the world of fabrication, you're designing and you're building basically ideas that you come up with or a customer comes up with from scratch, right? And so I've always kind of leaned more to that creative openness side. And that's probably why I was more drawn to Bitcoin, or at least to just really diving in and learning about it because I was open to it. It intrigued me. It was something new and interesting.
Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by OnRamp. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risks and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated, cold storage, multi-sig vault, guarded by 3 independent, institutional-grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. To learn more, schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team. Go to www.onrampbitcoin.com. What was that moment, or what was your kind of introduction to it? Did you trip and fall over it? Did someone try to talk to you about it, or what was that experience?
We have vastly different avenues of how getting there. Mine is a fear of missing out because Ben was headlong into it so fast. with a lot of education. But I think, Ben, you start off. I can kind of fill in how I got to where I am, and then together. But Ben's definitely, I would say, if we're married, I come from the land world and the real estate world. Ben came into what I was doing and very quickly got up to speed to where he could sit in a meeting with any city council or anybody and talk the lingo, and he knew what he was doing. I was probably slower to learn. He would text me at 3 a.m, 17 podcasts and things to watch on Bitcoin, what's going on here. And he'd ask me in about 2 days, hey, did you see any of those? I'm like, dude, at what point I didn't have time to watch all these? But so he's been the driver on that world and really got me up to speed. And so I'll let Ben tell us how we got there, and then I'll fill in my side.
Sure. I'll go back a little. And it's funny because as a farmer, like I said, you spend a lot of time alone. And one of the things you do as a farmer, we're apple farmers, is during spring, you had to go do frost. So you have to sit up in the field next to the wind machines to see if it's going to frost or freeze out, right? Because you're in bloom. And if the temperature drops, you got to turn on the wind machines, and that mixes the air. You turn the water on and you raise the heat level to not freeze out your crop. So you have to stay awake and you have to be there. So I'm listening to like AM radio in 2012, and these guys, they're talking aliens, they're talking Area 51, and they'd always talk about Bitcoin. You know what I mean? And I was like, no. I listened to it, and I even got to a point, it was probably 2012, 13, where I actually tried to buy it. And I got to the point where I had to put in all of my information, my driver's license, and I was like, no, I'm not doing this. And I just hadn't studied it enough. I was just listening to AM radio. And as time progressed, maybe fast forward to 2015, 16, 17, I'm listening to all these books on the creature of Jekyll Island and our debt-based monetary system and how fiat works and how it's 100% failure rate and the fractional reserve system, just all of that stuff. And then more content started coming out about Bitcoin. And, you can name them, right? Saifedean and Saylor and Jeff Booth and, all these guys, that information was available. And I really started to dig in, and having that background prior, knowing how that inflation hurt people and it sucked your life energy away. Bitcoin then resonated with me, and there was just more information out there for me to consume. And I think probably where it clicked for Brad and I was when Saylor talked about, and this is fast forward a few years, how it's digital real estate. And as you think about that, you're like, well, that's true. It's a scarce, desirable piece of property. And so then you connect those dots back to what we were doing by then. And we were in the land and saying, well, let's liquidate some of this land, sell, and start establishing our land in Bitcoin world on the ledger. And so we started acquiring Bitcoin to hold it. And probably initially it was just for the investment, thinking, well, this can be an investment. This can be something we'll grow, and then we'll sell it and we'll take that money and then go buy more land. But as we've evolved through the space, understanding that you never sell your Bitcoin, you borrow against it, and then use that to then go create value out in the real world by developing land. And then you complete that cycle, right? Where then you resell that and buy more Bitcoin, but you never sell it. And so we've evolved through that. Brad's learned a lot about it and has given a lot of trust in me to implement that strategy as a company to move forward.
Yeah, and on my side of it, Ben nailed it for me on the aha moment. But prior to my aha moment, I was buying Bitcoin we started buying Bitcoin personally before we ever established it through the business. So we were more or less taking the profit, dispersing it within our company and buying it personally and kind of talking about it. And Ben had sent me that one with Saylor when he talks about, would you buy a corner booth of a piece of property in Manhattan? Have you missed the boat? And for me, being so much into the real estate world, is just changed from, this isn't a coin, this isn't currency, it's digital property with no tenant. And I remember even calling Ben and saying, hold on here, you finally got me. Like, get it. It is different. It's not this coin thing that we're winning from Super Mario Brothers. It's something different than that. And so that was my real aha moment. But I go back to one of the strengths that we've had is Ben came into this trusting, kind of learning from me on the dirt side. And there's absolute trust. If I say, hey, this is how I see it. Now he's knowledgeable enough to give input. But those first few years, he was just learning. That's how I kind of feel I'm getting past those first few years of the Bitcoin to where he'll send me something or come with a strategy. It's like, no, I trust you. I'll get educated a little bit more so I make sure, but there's never a no at this point. It's we're synced up on that. He'll call and say, hey, Microstrategy, what are we doing on that? And, do you want to do this and this? I say, yeah, you sent me enough podcasts. I feel good with that one. And so I still think in our world, we're 50-50 in business and we're perfectly aligned. But the strength of what we have is, I almost think now, and Ben called me on it. I was driving back from a property here a couple of weeks ago and kind of more put it into context was I still kind of am in the weeds a little bit more within the platting. I sit on a city council here locally. And so learning code and being able to fight the code battle and do those things you have to do on the dirt side. And that gives Ben on the other side to really establish what our Bitcoin model is going to be. So I don't have to spend my time there, but having the trust. And we've talked through it that old adage, I'm sure Ben has the saying better than I do, but bringing our two heads together and accomplishing that has been essential. When I was by myself, I remember when Ben, it's funny he said something about aliens and what you were listening to. I remember when my son was down there, our sons are best friends. And my son called me and says, Dad, I had just sold a plat. This is before Ben and I were together, and I had a little bit of money. And he says, you got to buy this Bitcoin. Ben's telling us all about it. And I said, are you talking about the moon landings and the pyramids and what else are you talking about at the time? And I'm sure that was, and that was kind of the joke. And I said, you guys are crazy. I said, I don't think about that. I'm not putting any money in. That was probably 2015, 16, maybe even earlier than that. And so it morphed into that with just the trust. So I think it's important for mine. I don't know if I make that leap going from being a dirt developer where I can drive by that every single day and see it to this thing that feels like it's out there a little bit. So anybody out there that's thinking about that, there's all the groups, there's the podcasts, get educated, feel like you're in a group of people working together. I think it's been essential for me to feel like I'm not relying wholly upon my knowledge. I trust Ben. I trust a group. There's certain people within the podcast world now that we trust. And that gives me a lot of comfort. We're kind of in this together now. It feels like in the Bitcoin world, right? Where once you get kind of all in, you're with it with everybody, and having that comfort with everybody, I think, is a helpful tool for guys like me that come from the assets sitting there. It's very easy to drive by and see what I have every day. And now that's different in this Bitcoin world. So a group of people around you, a group of people that you can bounce ideas off, I think is kind of essential to make that move comfort-wise for me.
Do you guys have other individuals that you feel are part of the group and the conversation, and are there like local Bitcoin meetups or events that you've gone to, or is it more so the two of you guys and then everything kind of in the digital world with what you're talking about with podcasts and books and other resources?
I mean, really, it's just been that. It's been the books and the podcasts, gone to the Bitcoin conference, but it's just what's out there online. I know there's a few things here they try to get together locally and do networking events for real estate, and then there's a separate one for Bitcoin, and we've just never gone. But maybe we should look into that.
Tim, I'll share one thing too. I'll tell a secret on Ben. It's not a secret. It's there's nobody within our circle of influence that has not received a podcast or a text message from Ben about Bitcoin with the press. Hey, do your own research. I think you should have a little bit of it. This is just something I want to share with you because I don't want you to miss the ball. And so maybe not groups of people here, but I would say if Ben doesn't have a tattoo of Bitcoin, I'll be surprised. I've never seen it. But yeah, I mean, very vocal to those that want to learn it. Very open, like, hey, probably not in depth of our detail of what we do within our business, but more or less, hey, you should have a little bit of this. And so I think most people, I went on a job site the other day to talk to a person. It was a realtor about buying a plat from us. And the realtor I didn't know super well, but he made a comment to me. He says, hey, the guys coming to look at this, they're Bitcoiners, so they're trustworthy. They're good dudes. They got it. And so there was a little knowledge out there that we must participate in it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. I do feel like I have all these text threads and groups, and I guess that's just my nature. I learn something, and it's almost like either am I going crazy or the light bulb went off, and I want other people to know about it. I think that's where we've done well in business, Brad and I, is we never have that sense of scarcity and keep things quiet. And I know scarcity works in Bitcoin, but my point is we're an open book. We'll tell you everything we know. You want to come meet with us, we'll tell you about real estate. Like, there's no secrets. It's abundance, right? It's creativity. It's exciting. It's enthusiasm. And so when you have that mindset, and when you listen, I guess I compare it this way. These books and these podcasts, they're touching on these first principles, right? And these first principles are based in truth. And when you hear truth, you feel it. It resonates with you, and that inspires you. I heard Ben Workman say the other day, Jack Mallers is electric. Well, why is he electric? What does that mean? What that means is when he's speaking truth, eternal principles like the law of the harvest, proof of work, the law of sacrifice, right? The law of physics, that resonates. You feel that. You understand it, but you feel it. And so to me, that's like invigorating. That's like, I love that. So I'm shooting out texts all the time. And, sometimes I sit back and say, you know what, if I just stop texting, would anybody ever send me anything? And probably not, but that's okay too. I just feel like people should know about it. They should be excited about it. And I never tell them directly buy Bitcoin. I say, just put in the time. You need to be the proof of work. You need to sacrifice your time, effort, and energy to go study it for 100 hours. Then come back and we'll talk. And so that's my stance.
What are your views on kind of where we are with the new incoming red wave administration, the repeal of Sub 121, interest rates dropping, at least for now, all of these tailwinds, not just from a price appreciation standpoint, but from a Bitcoin as collateral standpoint? Remember, Ben, you and I talking about, hopefully all of that developing and progressing over the next couple quarters or years. And so what's your view and thought on all of that?
And maybe I hop in a little bit on our end, and then you follow with the more technical side of things, if that works. In the development world, it's very cash heavy, right? When you get involved in it, you got to buy the dirt, you got to go do all the development, you got to get it sold. So it's always the old thing. Everybody thinks that the developers are rich, but you ain't getting rich until the last few lots are sold. That's just how it works. And so in our world, we had to solve a money problem. Coming together, we had a little bit behind us. And so I remember working very hard. I think Ben and I called about everybody out there to say, who's going to lend us the money to buy raw ground? Who's going to do it? We'd always say, that's our biggest problem right now. We can find ground to buy, and we know how to develop it. And we really have the people in place, the national buyers that buy pretty much anything we develop. But we had to go get the money. Who's going to lend it to us? So when we solve that problem, we have a couple of lenders now we have a track record to where realistically on a dirt plat, we can borrow 100% LTV. It's not cheap money, but it's their money, meaning it's there within 4 days. We can have it done and close on a deal. That solved that problem. And so Ben and I say, well, we're 2/3 of the way there now. We can get the money, we can buy it, but how do we use our Bitcoin? How are we going to get that? How are they going to monetize that? How are the banks going to lend us against our own Bitcoin? If we get to that world, it eliminates, that high debt or the high interest rate debt that we're getting on the raw dirt. Nobody wants to take that raw dirt entitlement risk. Most lenders try to shy away from it. They're scared until you have a preliminary plat. So we end up paying that. Well, if we cut that from 12% or 13% money down to 5 or 6% money loaning against our Bitcoin, that's a massive swing. That's millions of dollars in interest difference on our projects that goes right back into us in our circle, right back into profit, which buys more Bitcoin. And so that could go right back to the bank that's custodying the Bitcoin anyway. And so it's massive for us. I'll let Ben get back into it. But once we get a lender that wraps their head, I know they're getting close to doing that, but once that becomes more mainstream, our world it's almost will be like rocket fuel for what we can do. It will be going from where we are today, say there's 1,000 lots we have under roof that we're working on, to overnight you could put, Ben will go on a walkabout and come back with 5 different plats we should buy, just because of the ease of the money or the cost of the money. If it gets that cheap and that much easier to do because they're really lending us our money, our Bitcoin's going up at 40% anyway. It will be massive in the development world if we can borrow against our Bitcoin. But that's my opinion of it. Ben can get probably way more detail.
No, I mean, absolutely, right? So I'm super encouraged by what's coming down the pipe with the Trump administration, very pro Bitcoin. They're very innovative, being very forward thinking when it comes to possibly we set up a strategic reserve and we allow the banks to custody this. And lending is happening, but it will happen on a level like possibly Saylor says. It's SOFR plus 50 basis points or 100 basis points. So if we can go out there and borrow against our own Bitcoin that's growing at 40 to 50% a year at 5%, go buy raw ground and then take that ground all the way to finish vertical homes, lease it up 90% for 90 days, you're set. You're into permanent financing. You refi that, you pull out all that margin, you have a liquidity event, and you buy more Bitcoin. And then with your cash flows, you could buy more Bitcoin, and then you repeat the cycle. And so I think our focus for the last 2-3 years has been build that war chest, have that dry powder ready. And we have used it a little bit as far as showing our lenders liquidity. I mean, there's liquidity requirements, and we've showed them our financials when it comes to Bitcoin. I honestly don't know if some of them even know what they're looking at. They look at the fiat currency number. They don't even know it's tied to Bitcoin, but it's worked. So now once that bill gets passed, I believe it does get passed, in my opinion, within the first 100 days. I think it changes everything for us to borrow, as well as who's selling their Bitcoin. I mean, think about it.
Right.
If M2 money to supply is 8%, and you can get a loan against your Bitcoin at 5%, and the Bitcoin's growing at 40 to 50%, you're mental if you sell your Bitcoin. Why? For what? They'll give you the money. Right? They're in the business of creating the money through lending. And so I love it when Trump said, do not sell your Bitcoin. And Saylor said, do not sell your Bitcoin. That's the mantra. And now I think initially when we got into it, I had to convince Brad a little bit. Like any time if we need liquidity, I push one button, it's in our bank account in 24 hours. And that was calming, right? Because we weren't stuck. It's very liquid. Now we've shifted to where, no, you're never touching that button. We're only adding to it. We're not selling. We'll borrow against it and then go implement our plan and create value in the real world.
Yeah, it is really interesting and far-reaching when you realize how liquid it is and how that plays into the volatility on the weekends. It's the only thing that is liquid, yeah, as we all know. So, hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by Stampseed. If you're in cold storage, you know how important it is to protect your seed phrase. That's why I recommend you head over to stampseed.com and check it out for yourself. This seed phrase storage device is one solid piece of titanium. There are no loose pieces, and you can hammer your seed phrase in letter by letter. When you go to stampseed.com, use promo code TIM15 for a 15% discount across the website. That's TIM15. How do you guys think about Bitcoin versus what Saylor's doing with Microstrategy and Bitcoin as an asset versus what you might call a Bitcoin equity?
Looking at what he's doing, I think we really just copied his strategy on a small scale. We're either raising debt or selling equity, right? To then go take on a project, add value, and either sell it at paper stage or finished lot stage or stabilized stage, and selling that and then buying Bitcoin. And so then that cycle just keeps repeating. We're probably a third away, right? We're not lending against it yet, but we're able to borrow against our land. And so I think it's on a small scale exactly what he's doing.
Yeah. For me, another part of that too is, how do we feel about what he's doing? Well, I can tell you, I don't know what the dates were, October, September, November, whenever Ben came and said we were getting ready to fund another plat. And he said, hey, I think we should allocate this towards Microstrategies. And I don't think I knew who he was, but I hadn't bought any personally up to that point. Sat down, he started sending me the things. And so do we believe in that? Absolutely. So within another fund we hold through our LLCs, we started buying quite a bit of Microstrategy just as I don't think we'd ever go past the Bitcoin or Microstrategy at this point until there's something else that, I don't know what the ratio is. It's a very small percentage compared to our Bitcoin. But I think we believe in that model and watching that. One thing that we operate in too right now, kind of just following up with Ben, is that the current banking world within it does work for us, right? You got to have that avenue to create the fiat. So whether it's selling software or selling stock of a company, which we don't have the option to, that's where we have to use the current banking world to go out there and to buy it, to create the capital to then buy the Bitcoin. And so it works for us, but we could buy double the amount of Bitcoin if we could take away double that up with the interest payment we have on our land. And so it'll be tremendous for us.
And one thought about MicroStrategy too that I thought about, it goes back to, if M2 is 8%, and now we can borrow against our Bitcoin at 5%, knowing it's growing at 40, 50, 60%, why wouldn't I buy MicroStrategy if Saylor's correct and says that it's 1.5 to 2 times Bitcoin? Because not only is the Bitcoin going to pay off the Bitcoin loan, but now you've taken it over and maybe you split that up and you go 50-50 or 75-25 and buy MicroStrategy. If it really is 1.5 to 2x Bitcoin performance. I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer. Who's going to sell their Bitcoin at that point? You've got to be of lesser intellect to do that. Like, say that's Saylor's words, right? If you're trading your Bitcoin, you just don't understand it.
Do you guys want to touch on the golf course that you're currently developing?
Brad, you go.
So we're in the early stages. Not early stages of looking at this piece of property. I think Ben told me that quite a few years ago, Ben had a houseboat rental business out on this big, gorgeous man-made lake, kind of on the Snake River. I think he said he stood up there in 2011 on this cliffside and said, "Someday I'll have my house right here." Said, just saying it to himself to see if it happened. Since then, we both houseboated out there a ton. So we've been out there for years and years. And when the winery that is on this ridge and down to the marina went into foreclosure, it's been in and out of foreclosure multiple times and into bankruptcy. And we'd been making offers on it for a long time, and kind of one of those things, again, working the problem, and thought it was dead, thought the attorneys weren't getting back to us anymore. And then got a phone call out of the blue and they said, "Hey, how much of this do you guys want?" And so we were able to work with another partner and pick up our parcels and his. And so in the early design stages right now, working with I would say one of the top 5 or 6 architects in the world, trying to get him we're courting each other right now, as we say, to see if we want to work with him and he wants to work with us to build this golf course resort community. So it'll be VRBOs, permanent residences, the overall development out there. At the end of this, it might be a 5 or 10 year build out by that time, but it's a $250-300 million project by the end of it. And so that'll be the biggest project we've taken on. But just breaking it down into steps, it's more exciting for us. And everybody we're talking to now, Ben and I, are trying to establish how are they going to buy into this private course with Bitcoin? How are we going to get that out there, and how are we going to do that? I think that'll be exciting, not only for us, but for the Bitcoin community. When they hear about a private that's so they can buy in with that, I think that will be very exciting. We're not to that stage where they can buy memberships today, but hopefully here in the near future, we'll be rolling that out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I look at a project like that, and it's a once in a lifetime. It's a legacy project, and it kind of goes back to Bitcoin, right? It changes your time preference. It changes your horizon. It changes to where people say, money doesn't bring you happiness. And I totally disagree with that. And what I mean by that is money is time. And when you own your own time, you're free. And when you're free, you're happy. And so then that allows you to do things that you otherwise probably wouldn't have done because you're in the grind. And so some of these projects, you get in quick and you got to get it approved as quick as possible. And you're building on these schedules and you're trying to get it leased up because you have to. This golf course project is a totally different game. It's a totally different beast. I don't care if it takes us 20 years, right? And so we want to build something that's lasting, that's one of a kind. We'll have the marina there. You can surf out on the lake. You can go up and play 18 holes of golf by a famous designer. You can live there. You can VRBO there. There'll be restaurants and event centers, winery. And so it's really been because of Bitcoin, because it makes us look at things in a different time frame and want to build something that's really a lasting legacy. And then be able to bring friends together and let's have a tournament. Let's have a Bitcoin tournament. Let's have a poker, Bitcoin, surfing extravaganza, over the weekend. Bring the wives and kids. And I mean, we're family guys. Brad's got 5 kids, and I forget how many I have, 6 or 7 or something like that. We really didn't even know what was causing it until about the 4th one. And then my wife was like, hey, this is what, so we've got 6 kids. And so we got big families, and it's about that. Right. And so it's not fast paced trade, make a bunch of money. It's not that. It's let's build something lasting that's generational. And that's exactly how I feel about Bitcoin. I want my kids and grandkids and their grandkids to have this opportunity and this freedom that Bitcoin brings you.
Are there any resources that you guys have used or continue to use on a day-to-day basis in addition to the podcasts and some of the other resources that you mentioned that you'd recommend for others? Also, where can people reach out to you if there's any place that you want to direct people to? And just any thoughts to kind of wrap up over the next little bit.
Ben, go ahead.
Okay. Like I said, we've got a lot of kids, and so they've got a lot of friends. And I just send them now on X Twitter, YouTube, and then send out the podcasts. And you name it. I love all the guys. I love what you're doing, and Jeff Booth and Foss and Jack Mahlers and Saifedean and Saylor, of course. And so it's kind of just like it with any kid or young person, it's sparking that idea. There's a good book out there by Napoleon Hill called Outwitting the Devil. And whether you believe in the devil or not, doesn't matter. But the point is, he says 99% of people are wandering. They're wanderers. They have no sense of direct purpose. And so in these kids, these young men, if you can just give them a little spark, and then they'll blaze their own trail as they go down the rabbit hole, is what we say. But and so books, podcasts, YouTube, Twitter is what I say.
Yeah, and how I see it, exactly the same. But one thing I see that we do is we've had mentors in the development world, in the farming world, and whatever that we look up to, and we look up to not only because they're good men, but probably when I look at it, the business aspect is they made a lot of money or they did a lot of cool things. And so we're starting to have people reach out to us, not only in the development realm, but we can sit down with them, and we do quite often. They want to pick our brain, and we'll tell them, like Ben said, I think people almost at times don't believe us that we're telling them everything, but we have nothing to hide. We're not in competition. We will let you know our numbers. We'll let you know whatever helps you, because we have our own projects. We're not fighting against you to get them. And some of that information, I would say, on the development world isn't as sexy as Bitcoin. And so there's not as many YouTube videos to go and find out about sewer pipe. There's nobody making podcasts on that. So we sit down and talk a lot of that stuff. I would say at this point, and that's been my journey kind of through Ben, is if you're interested in the Bitcoin world and that, there's more information out there now than you can ever digest. And so you got to put your time in. Nobody gets anywhere. They always look at the result, but nobody got there by getting lucky. You're not sitting there running podcasts just getting lucky. You put the time and the work into it to do it. And so I think the information is there. People just have to put the time down, put your head down, spend the time to get educated. That education, as you're on that journey for whatever you're on, will lead you in a multiple different ways. You don't know where it's going to go. You're on a trail today. I don't know if when you started buying Bitcoin, if you thought you'd be hosting podcasts, possibly, but I don't know if that was your goal. So get started and don't be scared to ask those questions. You're not dumb. You just got to ask the question and find the right people that can help point you. And I think that's one thing in the Bitcoin world. I don't know anybody when you ask a question that isn't ready to share their opinion and share as much information as you possibly want, to the point you're like, okay, I get it. You run marathons and you do Bitcoin. I got enough of both of them. I'm good. So just be willing to put the time in. I think you can get there.
Yeah. It's so refreshing anytime that you come across someone that has that abundance mentality. And the reality is, the more you help other people be successful, the more successful you become. And it's not even necessarily on a monetary basis. Kind of weird how that works, but I mean, that's talk about first principles, right, Ben?
Yeah, the way I think of it is, it's a digital gulch. You remember that from Iron Rand?
Mm-hmm.
And now shrugged. They had a physical location. That's what Bitcoin is in the digital world. It's where people that are willing to provide value, they obey the law of sacrifice, meaning I'm willing to put off something that I want today for something better in the future. I'm willing to put in the time today, the effort today, the mental, physical, spiritual energy today for something better in the future, right? That's the law of the harvest. That's farming. That's real estate development. And so as kids and young people, or anybody really understands that, that's why it makes sense to them, because it resonates, because it's true. This system that we've been living in, this creature of Jekyll Island, it's not a true feedback mechanism to the free market, where Bitcoin is a true free market. And so it's abundance, right? It's put in the work and then enjoy the fruits of your labor.
I'll just preface that with what Ben said. I can just be witness to that, because I play devil's advocate with Ben. I know his dream is a 911 Porsche, and he drives a pretty sweet car already. But I send him to him about on the weekly just to see how weak he's getting when Bitcoin hits 107,000. I'm sending him cars, and he's still sending them back to me like, dude, that's 2 Bitcoin. Are you crazy? We're not doing that yet. So he's living proof that put it off today, and I'll buy it with 1/10 of a Bitcoin here in a little while. So there's truth to it. He's not just telling story right now.
I mean, that's the truth, right? The truth of it is, you can have it all. You can have both. That's what you're trying to teach these young folks, is you can have it, but you have to sacrifice today. And then you can have it in the end. So it's like, do you really respect anyone that doesn't exercise discipline? I mean, a man that exercises discipline, you recognize that, you see that, and you respect that. And what does that mean? It means you learn to control your impulsive behavior, right? And then you say, well, I'm putting in the work. I'm going to go to that's why you respect athletes. They put in the work. It's proof of work. It's just like Bitcoin. And so they just use hash power and electricity, but we use mental energy and emotion and physical power to discipline ourselves to get a better result tomorrow. And so that's what Bitcoin is. It really is. That's why it resonates.
One thing on that triggered my memory too. Kind of interesting communities out there watching this in the future, and in the real estate game, in the apartment building game, in that rental game. That was my background. Ben and I had sat down and made this first purchase of Bitcoin. And it wasn't a few days later, there was a big parcel that came up that was pre-platted. It was for, I think it was either 153 apartments or 53 apartment doors. And I'm on the phone with the owner of the property, and he has all the civil work done, and it's ready. It's basically permit ready. Permits will be ready in 2 days. So I start running a prospectus. I put all the numbers together that afternoon. I called Ben. I'm like, hey, this is next door to our houses. We got to buy this. This is the coolest thing. It's done. Normally, our biggest headache is getting it platted and getting it to the civil side. So in my head, I'm going, man, a lot of my work is done. This is going to be gravy train. And Ben was kind of quiet on the other end. And he's like, well, we just set a plan in place with we're buying Bitcoin and we're going to stick to the model of flipping these plats and buying Bitcoin. And it was another light bulb moment, right? You're right. It was hard for me to get out of that. That's how we had created our money in the past, but we had a better avenue right now in the Bitcoin world. So just having a game plan and then sticking to it and getting out of your old roots, I think, having the comfort to move on from what's been so comfortable sitting there. I know I can make money over here. I know this little nugget will make it, but what am I willing to give up to make, to have it go forward in the Bitcoin world? Once you get educated, though, now there's no looking back. We kind of laugh at that. Now we don't look at those type of projects anymore. That's not what we're interested in.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time, and look forward to checking back in with you as everything moves forward here over the next couple of quarters.
Absolutely. I'll give you I call it X Twitter. I'm at land2ledger, the number 2 at land2ledger, Ben Harris. And yeah.
Mine's at Brad Beauchamp 44. So any questions? Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tim.